Let's pretend together that it's not a million degrees outside and have a nice cozy chat about autumn TBRs. Because it is September now, even if the weather hasn't quite gotten the memo, and I have a lot of autumnal reads that I want to get to this month and over the next couple of months. Typically I do a monthly TBR, but when I was looking at my TBR for this month, so many of them were autumnal that I figured let's actually just do an autumn TBR. Really get in the mood, set the tone, get the vibes right for a cozy, atmospheric, romantic, maybe a bit spooky autumn season. So I'm gonna go through all of the books on my autumn TBR, most of which are inherently autumnal. And then if you stick around to the end, I've also got 3 autumnal book recommendations in case you want ones that I already know I enjoy and have already been vetted. If you saw my TBR video last month, you might be remembering that it was a bit ambitious. Did I get anywhere near achieving the ambitious TBR that I set for myself? No, I did not. Did I learn from that lesson? No, I did not. I have another very ambitious TBR. It is a little bit more tame than last month, and part of that is because last month I had a lot of library books that I had to contend with. I had so many out at once, and actually a lot of those have had to go back unread or very quickly DNF'd despite me kind of wanting to read them, but I just wasn't in the mood for them, and I had to take them back because they had holds. I have only withheld 1 book from that batch to try to read this autumn, and that is We Spread by Iain Reid. It's not inherently autumnal, but it does take place in a forest, and it's about an artist who's dealing with grief and has to move to a secluded care home. And at first it's going really well, she's painting again, but then everything starts to go a bit funny. I've read a couple of Iain Reid books. I read I'm Thinking of Ending Things and then Foe. I loved Foe. I didn't get on so much with I'm Thinking of Ending Things. I struggle when books get super surreal. And I do get the vibe that We Spread might be like that, but I figure if there's ever a time for something like that, it's autumn. I don't know, just the spooky vibes feels like maybe that will go down better than it would at any other time of year. Moving on to some other books that are not inherently autumnal, but kind of fit the spooky atmospheric vibe. First we have I Will Never Leave You by Cara A. Kennedy. And I think the first paragraph of the blurbs kind of tells you everything you need to know, which is Maya has always known that spirits exist, even dabbled in light rituals, but she never imagined she'd need to banish her ex-girlfriend. And this is YA. I'm going to tell you about a book at the end of this that I read last month that was also YA and kind of fit a similar vibe. So I'm hoping this is going to continue that and give me all the like spooky witchcraft kind of vibes that I'm looking for. Then we have A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid, and this is dark academia and has been on my TBR for forever. I have had this book on my shelves since last year. Pretty sure Ava Reid's got another book or maybe even 2 out by now, but we need to finally get to this. My friend Frida has been bugging me for ages to read it so that we can talk about it. And Frida, if you're watching this, I'm committed that September is going to be the month that we're going to do this. So this is happening. Finally, you can hold me to that. And then finally within that category, I've got 2 books that I'm reading because I'm doing an event with the authors of the books in November, which is very funny because they're very different vibes to my book, which is a lighthearted rom-com. But the first of these is A Door in the Dark by Scott Reintgen. And this kind of looks like it maybe has dark academia vibes, this like school for wizards, but then also a portal spell malfunctions and they get stranded in the wilderness and have to survive. So I think it's like kind of dark academia, kind of not. It's like the reflection of my ring light. It looks like the Eye of Sauron. I love that so much. And then the other one is Malice House by Megan Shepherd. It's about a woman who goes to clean out her father's seaside home after he's died, and he was like a Pulitzer Prize winning author, and she finds his most recent manuscript and it's like hand scrawled and very different to anything else that he's written, and she starts to like hear voices and maybe spooky things are happening. So I think that sounds very atmospheric. Again, not inherently autumnal, but like the font is orange, so close enough, right? And before we get into the books that are inherently autumnal, I've got 2 that are not at all. The first one of these is The Man Who Planted Trees by Giono, and this was a gift for me for my birthday at the end of July, and it is a tiny book, so the fact that I haven't gotten around to it is honestly because I just put it on the wrong bookshelf. Otherwise I would have read this by now. So Steph, if you're watching this, I'm sorry, I am going to read this month. And it's basically about this man that goes back to the same valley, I think every year or every few years, to see this forest that is growing, having seen a shepherd actually plant the acorns to begin begin with. And then speaking of acorns, we have Emily Wilde's map of the Otherlands. And I say speaking of acorns because there are acorns on the book cover, which I feel like is maybe a little bit autumnal. I feel like I'm being delusional, but whatever. This is my channel. I was so obsessed with the first book in this series that it's in my top books of all time at this point, and I still haven't gotten around to the second book. I think there's like this fear, like what if I don't enjoy it as much, or what if it drags a little bit? I know it's the second in a trilogy, but honestly there's no excuse because I love this book. My husband got me this book, the second one, for my birthday, and it's just gorgeous and I really want to read it, so I'm gonna stop procrastinating. And that brings us to books that are inherently autumnal, and you know that means we're gonna be looking at romances, because romances are the ones that tend to be more explicitly seasonal, and I have got a fat stack of autumn romances. And a lot of these came out like at the exact same time. We'll start with Well Matched by Jen Deluca, and I say this is explicitly autumnal. It's actually not. It is Ren Fair themed though. It's part of her Well Met series, which all of those books take place at and around a Ren Fair. For me, Ren Fair season is autumn because I grew up going to the Carolina Renaissance Festival, which is September to November. I'm going in November. Ren Fair equals autumn. I think this Ren Fair takes place over the summer, but having read Well Met, which I know also takes place over the summer, I couldn't shake the autumn vibes even knowing it was the summer, because the Ren Fair immersion is the vibe. It's not like a summertime immersion, it's a Ren Fair immersion. And so I think this will be autumnal for me as well. I'm hoping. But speaking of Jen Deluca, she also has a new book out called Haunted Ever After, and this is spooky. It's about a girl who moves to a historic town in Florida and she finds out that her house is haunted, and this hot townie comes trying to help her figure out what happened, figure out who the previous owners were. So this is definitely spooky vibes. Then we have Given Our History by Kristyn J. Miller, and this is obviously not dark academia, but like light academia, I guess. It takes place at a university. Clara is an assistant professor of history, and it's a second chance romance. And I mean, just look at the cover. So autumnal academia goodness. Then we have Kindling by Bonnie Woods, and this is a lumberjack romance, and I don't know if I need to say anything more about that. One grumpy Scottish woodsman, one uprooted city girl, one autumn that changes everything. I feel like that is all I need to know about this. And that is all that I know. That's exactly what I knew when I pre-ordered the book. Look at the cover. Autumn vibes. And then I am ashamed to say that despite the fact that Laurie, Gilmore, and I share a publisher, I have yet to read The Pumpkin Spice Cafe. I know, it's appalling, but I'm finally going to read this book. I'm very excited. And this is about a girl that inherits a small town cafe and a hunky local farmer. You get the gist. But before I read The Pumpkin Spice Cafe, I am actually going to read Laurie Gilmore's new book in this series, The Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, which is about a bookshop owner, Hazel, who keeps finding secret messages in her books, and a hunky fisherman that helps her crack the code. Come on. And I have heard it through the grapevine, and by that I mean from my publisher, that you can read this one before Pumpkin Spice Cafe, and honestly, I just love a book about books, so I think I'm gonna go for the new one first. So that is my autumn TBR stack. Did we talk about audiobooks? No, we didn't. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to get through all of those in a month, but I think by calling this my autumn TBR instead of my September TBR, it gives me a little bit more leeway. I would actively like to read every single one of these during the autumn, and I actually think that's reasonable. We've got 6 romances there. If I get to 4 of them over the next 3 months, I will be happy. Like, I'm not going to hold myself to this. It's a menu that I can choose from. If you stuck around or skipped ahead to get the recommendations, now is your time. And I've got a romance, a dark academia fantasy, and a YA urban fantasy for you. We'll start with romance, and that is You Again by Kate Goldbeck. I love this book. It's now one of my top favorite romances of all time. And it's about Josh and Ari, who live in New York City, and they keep running into each other over the years, which is like, just does not happen in New York City. And it starts because they're sleeping with the same woman, but then over the years they become friends, and then maybe more than friends. I recommend this book all the time to people who don't read romance because it doesn't read like a lighthearted, fluffy romance. Honestly, Josh and Ari both kind of suck at the beginning, and by the end you just want them to be together so badly because they just are good for each other. I don't know. It's a really, really difficult thing to pull off, and she's done it so well. It's billed as a When Harry Met Sally retelling, and I think the vibe fits, if not the actual plot beats necessarily. But also just, again, look at that cover. Immaculate autumn vibes. Now we've got a dark academia fantasy, and that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is not my favorite dark academia, but it is definitely the most autumn vibes one, I think. It takes place at Yale, where all of the secret societies are actually magical secret societies, and a girl named Alex is kind of investigating these secret societies because there's been a death on campus. There's forbidden magic, there's this murder mystery, there's this kind of elite university vibe. Honestly, it's so good. And then the last book that I'm going to recommend is actually one that I read last month. Like I mentioned, it kind of just set the tone for me, made me really want to be digging into some of these like spookier, more atmospheric books, and that is the Invocations by Krystal Sutherland. Apologies for the glare. This is like a library copy. I've held onto it and incurred fines so that I could hold it up during this video. You're welcome. But the Invocations is a YA urban fantasy about Emmer, Jude, and Zara, who are all 17 years old. Emmer writes invocations, which are basically spells that women can put like almost tattoo on their pulse points. Jude is this reclusive rich girl who tried to give herself an invocation and ended up tethering a demon to her that is now feeding on her body and soul. And then Zara is a girl whose older sister was murdered, and she is trying to find necromantic magic that will help her bring her sister back from the dead long enough to reconcile with her because they fought before she died. And these three come together because they all realize that there is essentially a serial killer that is killing women that have Emmer's invocations on them in order to steal their invocations, which shouldn't be possible. I've done a full review over on my monthly wrap-up video, which is the video that I will have posted right before this. So if you want to hear more about what I thought of this book, then go check it out. But in the meantime, definitely recommend it. That is my unrealistic autumn vibes TBR and autumn book recommendations. I have a really exciting video that I've been working on for a while coming up. If you have been around the channel for a while, you might remember my Goodreads alternatives video. In fact, you might have seen it not that long ago because a lot of you are still coming to the channel because of it, where I tested Goodreads alternatives and honestly was kind of let down. Well, I am repeating that experiment with new contenders and an old contender. I feel pretty confident in saying that I will be deleting my Goodreads at the end of this experiment because it's gone so well. So if you're not already subscribed, be sure to hit that button. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.